Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Patrick Liu, and I'm going to be your host for the Diabetes Survival Guide show. I'm the founder of the Diabetes Management Group, where I am a fitness and wellness coach for people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. And this show will be a way to share the phenomenal stories about people with all forms of diabetes, healthcare professionals who work with people with diabetes, health and wellness coaches who work with people in this population, and or caregivers and relatives with people with diabetes across the world. A little bit of a personal background for me as a show starter is I was diagnosed with prediabetes back in 2021 and made some modifications to my lifestyle and habits to successfully reverse it in 2022. However, that onset of me receiving prediabetes in 2021 triggered my memories of when my grandpa, who passed away when I was a sophomore in high school from kidney failure secondary to his type 2 diabetes, about the care that was misunderstood and not the greatest at that time. So I want to provide this show as a way to explore the different spectrums of diabetes and healthcare professionals sharing their tips of what they've seen helpful in working with folks with them, and then some things that weren't as helpful, so that y'all can learn something. So thank you so much, and we'll get started with the disclaimers and the show.
Warning. Disclaimers. This show may contain sensitive and explicit content related to suicide or self-harm. If you or someone you know is experiencing thoughts of suicide or self-harm, please seek immediate medical attention. The information provided in this show is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It is important to know that help is available. If you or someone you know is in a crisis, please contact a mental health professional or emergency health services immediately. You can also call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988 in the United States of America, or contact emergency medical services, whichever number that may be in your region. In addition to seeking immediate medical attention, it is important to address any underlying mental health issues that may be contributing to suicidal or self-harm thoughts. This may include seeking therapy or counseling, practicing self-care techniques, and making lifestyle changes to promote overall well-being. Remember, you are not alone, and there is always hope. Please reach out for help if you or someone you know is in a crisis. This show is not medical or a treatment plan and may contain sensitive and explicit content. It is intended for the general education and demonstration purposes only. This content should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat any health, medical, or physical conditions. Don't use this show to avoid going to your own healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with your healthcare provider before attempting anything you learned in this show. You agree to identify and hold harmless the creators of the material for any and all losses, injuries, or damages resulting from any and all claims that arise from your use or misuse of this show's material. The creators and guests of this show make no representation about the accuracy or suitability of this content. Use these materials at your sole risk. Views and opinions are individual to the creators and guests of this show and do not represent any other opinions or entities and are not intended to offend anybody. Enjoy the show.
So we'll start things off with my story of my diagnosis. Back in 2021, I was diagnosed with prediabetes after talking to my healthcare provider of some of the symptoms that I developed over this past year and a little bit about my life earlier on. So the main symptoms that made me seek out my primary healthcare provider was feeling like I had to go to the bathroom 5 times within 1 hour consistently over multiple weeks or months at times, and it was just not the best time because I felt very embarrassed. I was very cognizant of it, and it distracted me from learning materials in class. So earlier in that year of 2021 and late 2020, I was in my last year of getting my bachelor's degree in athletic therapy for my program in Utah, and trying to sit still in a class was pretty tough because I felt like I needed to go to the bathroom consistently, even though I was just taking small sips of water, and my urine output just wasn't matching up with how much water that I was drinking at times. And then it was also tough because whenever I did drink a bunch of water and feeling like crap, I'm really thirsty. I should try and like drink a bunch of water to try and quench my thirst, but the timelines just didn't quite add up for me, and I thought it was attributed to my stress, and that was affecting how my body was functioning, and figured once these semesters are over and I'm accepted into a doctor of physical therapy program, I should be fine. I should be good. But needless to say, I did graduate, and then I spent the first part of my summer break working at my family's restaurant, and I thought, okay, things may have calmed down a little bit. I was able to survive a road trip going across the country from Utah to Maryland and get started with my summer jobs over there to get familiar with the area. I started noticing my symptoms came back again, and they were about the same severity of what it was prior to my move and during my last year. And I figured, this is weird. Like, I adjusted to this new place, yet it's coming back again. Like, I'm not sure what's going on. But then I brushed it off again, thinking maybe it's stress of moving across the country, that it's now catching up to me, because that 4-day drive was insane and crazy. And I figured this should be fine once I start up my semester, and we'll go from there. But it didn't get better. We started the semester classes again, and I still felt those urges going through. So I scheduled a visit to see my primary care provider and told them about my symptoms that I was having, and they decided to get a blood work panel done, and they found out that my A1C scores, so that is a test to determine how your blood sugars have been over the past about 90 days, and they found that I had an A1C score of 5.7%. So it's right on the cusp of prediabetes. And due to genetic predispositions of myself being an Asian American, my primary care provider told me that, hey, just make some simple adjustments to your diet, keep maintaining your exercise regime, and we just think that your genetic factors predispose you to have a higher A1C score compared to other folks. And for me, I was thinking to myself, really? Is that really it? Because I don't really think that was the case. But I decided to accept their recommendations and took a step back, talked with my roommates, to one of whom who has reading the research on how our liver works and looking up what the American Diabetes Association recommended for nutritional guidelines, International Diabetes Federation, and a variety of more, and adjusted my diets where I started to limit the amount of processed foods that I ate more at consistent times, and following some of the recommendations that my roommate has talked about. And fortunately, those has helped me. So when I got my blood work the next year, my results came back and it dropped down to a 5.6%, which to myself, I was thinking, man, it's strange that it just dropped from a 5.7 to only a 5.6, yet I'm still experiencing the symptoms of my bladder just going out of control. Then I was referred to a urologist, and now I'm diagnosed with overactive bladder syndrome, which currently I'm taking some medications for. So now that's kind of addressing those. Now in 2023, I decided that after connecting with some nutritionists and dietitians who work closely with people with type 2 diabetes and listening onto some podcast shows such as Andrew Huberman, More Plates, More Dates, and a variety more of being more proactive in people's health with a comprehensive blood work panel, I decided to invest into a comprehensive blood work panel where my results came back, but my fasted insulin scores were a lot higher compared to what the norms were supposed to be. And I just thought to myself, diabetes just isn't based off the markers of the A1C scores. I think it's also based off of the smaller lifestyle choices that then leads up to it, and the lack of education that is that would lead to that. So I decided to get a continuous glucose monitor to track, you can see that right there, to track my process and my sensitivity towards foods, and hopefully reduce the levels of my fasted insulin scores in order to maximize and improve my health. And what I've noticed is by adjusting my diet and improving my exercise routines, on doing it on a consistent basis, practicing some stress management techniques and mindfulness trainings, I've realized that it's been super helpful in alleviating some of the other symptoms that I've had, such as the hunger pains that I've been receiving, and I'll talk a little bit more about my hunger pains earlier on. Even the fatigue that I've been feeling, that I've consistently felt for the majority of my life, and I'll explain a little bit of what my thought process is for what I feel like my fatigue is similar to, as well as my mental health in the aspect that I've gotten to the point where I'm not considering suicide. I don't think I considered committing suicide or having any of that since like end of March and beyond, just by implementing the techniques and trainings that has been talked about by my health and wellness coaches, and adjusting my diet, and improving my fitness regime, and all of these accumulations together, that it had that compounding effect to finally get myself to the point where I feel great, and having a better understanding of what I can do to improve my own health. And I am currently working with a client right now with the diabetes management group, where they're able to see some successful results based off the recommendations that I've accumulated from different resources and presented it in a manner that was personalized for them. And I figured that, man, I could definitely use what I've learned to support other people, and also making sure that I'm able to support myself with it. So hence why I've created the diabetes management group earlier this year, at the time of recording this video, in January of 2023. I worked with a variety of business coaches to get my mindset on track, and here I am now. So that is my current story with that. And now I want to change the lenses of more of why I decided to create my company with the diabetes management group, because it wasn't just focused on my personal experience, it was also due to the experience that I've had with my mental health earlier and with my grandpa's story. So with my grandpa, I'm not too versed in his story of how and when he got his diagnosis, but when I was a sophomore in high school, he passed away from kidney failure secondary to his type 2 diabetes. And for me, that just negatively impacted me so much so that I figured, like, damn, I could have done so much more to show my love and support for him earlier on, instead of neglecting caretaking for him at times. And it just was really bogging me down, and I didn't quite know what diabetes was at that time. I was going through a variety of phases during my sophomore year, and it just was not a great mental space for me. And when I got diagnosed with prediabetes, all those memories that I've had back when I was a sophomore in high school that I didn't think much of at the time, it hit me like a crap ton of bricks at that moment of time. And it just allowed me to realize that, hey, this is a serious issue that's going on, considering that my grandpa, he immigrated here from China, as well as my dad, who immigrated here from China. And based off of the American Diabetes Association's diabetes is primary certification that I had an opportunity of taking, I learned that East Asians who immigrate from China and Japan or those other countries in that area, and when they come to America, they have an increased predisposition for developing type 2 diabetes and prediabetes due to the dietary changes that is going on. And for me, I just found that really crazy, and just wanted to dig more into understanding what all those things entail by creating and founding my group, so that I can provide more educational resources to serve those, and providing wellness services for people, so that in the event that they are unsure of where to go with their health, I would like to bridge that gap between them. So because of my situation with my grandpa passing away, that really hit home for me of there just isn't a lot of education for people understanding what diabetes is and how to manage them appropriately. And some people may say, oh, you need to completely eliminate sugars, or you need to take a ton more insulin and you'll then be cured of your type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. But unfortunately, based off of the stories that I've heard and some of the clinical rotations that I was in, and even working with my mentors who are registered dietitians that work closely with people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes is that they, once they do reverse it, they develop type 2 diabetes or prediabetes again, but then it comes back worse because once you get to those levels, you have an increased risk and disposition of developing more severe symptoms because of it. And I like to relate that analogy to think about a sock that you stretch out a ton, and then now you're still wearing that sock, and sure, it's able to contract again and stick on tight, but since you already lost some of the elastic bands that's around in there and you develop again, you just stretch that band of that sock again so it doesn't have as much of that elasticity to even stay on for yourself. And that's what I compare diabetes to, is a way that you would have multiple bands in your sock, and once you got prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, one of that band is now broken, so then you have like less bands to actually hold up to it, and those bands would be all the different organs and systems in your body, because your blood sugar, it goes to those organs in order to supply it with fuel and move around and move through. So then by being able to do preventative strategies, in my opinion, I feel like you're able to allow your organs to become a bit stronger, so then some of those bands can start coming back. But then if you are not consistent with it, and then it just breaks it down, and now you have way less bands, and it's more harmful in that situation. So because of that, I developed diabetes management groups so I can address some of those impairments and work specifically with people who want to make the lifestyle changes so that it's a way that's more personalized for them to understand that, hey, even though I am struggling with type 2 diabetes, and let's say you're a primary care provider or a nutritionist who isn't a specialist with working with people with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes or any sorts of forms of diabetes, and they just recommend a cookie cutter diet, and they're like, all right, try keto. You tried keto, but then you still miss those snacks that you love, or cake, or those other sweets that you do enjoy. And once you're done with it and your scores revert back, and then now it's like, okay, now I can start eating cake again. You eat that, but then it starts to go crazy with your blood work and levels again. And I feel like that's not a sustainable approach. Instead, having more of an educated approach of like, okay, if I want to have that cake, how can I eat that cake while adjusting other factors so that my body can then regulate the sugars that would come in appropriately, and I can have a more holistic attitude with my diet, exercise, fitness, and accepting that I can still have the foods that I like and enjoy. I just need to change and rearrange the order of how I would eat some of them. And that's the approach that I really enjoy, like, taking, of looking at the full picture, because diabetes affects everything. And by having that lack of knowledge that I've seen with my grandpa and with myself, I realized that I want to serve other folks that it's not on there. And we're going to get into more of the gruesome and darker parts of this story. So this is a trigger warning, and if you are struggling with anything, make sure you reach out for help and support, as we talked about in the disclaimers earlier in this video. So the thing that I want to mention is that since my grandpa passed away with kidney failure, he was also put on dialysis a bit earlier. And if y'all aren't sure what dialysis is, that's essentially when your kidneys basically stop functioning and they hook you up onto a machine where they put needles in both your arms, from my knowledge and understanding at that time, and they would essentially filter your blood into a machine to clean up the blood for you and then move it back into your body, because your kidneys are supposed to do that. However, for the dialysis unit machines, they're not as great as our kidneys as they were functioning, so trying to rid of all those toxins, it's not able to do it at the point where it's as efficacious as what our kidneys can do. So by cycling through and coming back in, that just drains so much of your energy, causes you to be fatigued and tired, and moving sometimes can be painful. And if you're stuck in that state, then all you want to do is try and sleep. But since you're not able to sleep because of the pains that's going on due to your kidneys shutting down and the other symptoms that goes on with type 2 diabetes if they're unregulated, such as diabetic neuropathy, where your foot feels very painful, stinging, burning, or you just don't feel any sensations at all, then it just increases your risk of getting a cut. And if you're not sure what that cut is, you get infected and then lead to a situation where someone would get an amputation. And I don't wish that upon anybody. And we're trying to do the steps to prevent that before that happens. Or if someone has already received an amputation, then what can we do to address the other factors so that we can manage everything else? Fortunately, my grandpa did not get to this part where he needed the amputation, but it's got more to the point of his kidneys just wasn't able to clean out enough of those toxins enough to supply his body, and he ended up passing away because of all of that. And it was just pretty brutal with the expense that happened with that. And for myself, and just prefacing a little bit more of my story, I've been working in my family's restaurant since I was 5 years old, and we were in a low socioeconomic bracket, living in a tourist town in Utah where we're close by a variety of national parks. And back in the early 2000s, some of the community members over there and my neighbors weren't as kind as liking to diversity over there, because we were the only Asian family that was growing up there at the time. And I felt like that I wasn't supported by my community, because I remember vividly at times where I was bullied consistently. So some of these instances occurred where I was shoved into the girls' bathroom to try and get in trouble for it. And then one time when I felt like I needed to go to the bathroom and had some urgencies and frequencies to go, I went to the bathroom, was excused to go over there. But then I remember this one specific bully who kicked down the door and broke down the lock on that side and exposed me trying to poop and pee, and that just traumatized me, because he also had a few of the lackeys that was pointing and laughing at me, and it was just very embarrassing. And because of that, I developed this mistrust towards other people in my class, and whenever someone did show kindness at that time, I wasn't sure how to respond to it, because are they doing it more for trying to get close to me so that they can bite me in the ass later, or are they actually being genuine? And from my experiences in those moments and situations, sometimes they would become your friends. They're your friends for about 2 years before they slap you in the face. And I just tend to be more isolated at times, and it just wasn't good in the school environment. And with my schedule of the day-to-day, where school wasn't that great because I didn't know who to trust, and whenever someone did show kindness, sometimes I would accept it, but not accept it to the full extent, or maybe I would get taken advantage of when I trusted them at that moment, thinking, oh, this is going to be different. We'll see if this can work. But unfortunately, it wasn't for some of those experiences. And once I was done with school, I would then go to work for about 8 to 12 hours, I would say. And that work when I was a kid entailed washing the dishes, working at the cash register up front, and even being a host where I would seat customers at the table. And I didn't really view my family members as family members at that time, because we were working literally that entire day. And after we were finished up with the day, we would then go back home, where I would greet my grandparents and then brush my teeth and then go to bed, and then rinse and repeat for that cycle. For weekends, it would be waking up, going straight to work, working, and then go back home to sleep, do our hygiene stuff, and rinse and repeat. This also included holidays. So for Christmas, Thanksgiving, all those other times, majority of my life has been spent doing that. And the work environment as well, it wasn't the greatest, because whenever I did make a mistake, since the stress levels were so high and fluctuating, unfortunately I'd be on the receiving end for any mistakes that I did make, and negative events would be thrown at me. So it could be like emotional outbursts, saying that, hey, you're useless. Like, why did you do this? Like, why did you make the mistake? Aren't you learning? What's going on with you? And it being fed that background, it just wasn't great. And then whenever I was trying to do my best to be quiet because I was trying to learn from my mistakes, it would be, why are you so quiet? Like, well, speak up when you need to say something. So it's very contraindicatory of whenever I try to do something, it's like you're too loud when you do it, but then whenever I settle down a little bit, oh, you're too quiet now, so you got to try and step yourself up. Like, it seemed like the expectations were always changing, and I just was not doing anything right. So the stressors from the school, and then stresses from my family situation when I was growing up, which fortunately has been getting significantly better, thankfully. Now that stressors are kind of been laxed through, became more mature, and I don't blame anyone at that time for those situations, because if I were to put myself in their shoes, someone who is different and you're not sure how to respond, you just kind of fall on whoever is the loudest in that lead. And unfortunately, the loudest person at that time were the bullies in school. And then for my family situation, if you're struggling with financials, where if one customer could make or break the difference of you losing your house and your restaurant and everything that you've worked up to when you immigrated from China, I can kind of see how those stressors can be there, as well as the dynamics of the cultural differences between Chinese culture of how you raised your kids versus Western culture of how you raise your kids were drastically different at that time, and now it has significantly gotten better as society has gotten better with understanding how the parenting styles affects the child's upbringing. And fortunately, I have been having that empathy to take a step back and realize that the lack of education in those situations prevented people from being the best of themselves to provide a nurturing environment, and I don't accredit or have any negativity towards them to this day, and I've accepted that those negative experiences have actually helped strengthen me to get to the point where I can start serving others and understand and relate to their struggles. But the last point that I wanted to talk about of how it teetered off my mental health for years was when I was serving and bussing tables in the restaurant, and I was waiting and being a waiter. We had this group of people who were visiting the national parks that came from China, and they asked me in, I believe, Cantonese or Mandarin. Can't exactly remember the specifics at this time, but they were asking me, hey, like, talk to us in Chinese. And I was thinking to myself, oh, I don't speak Chinese. I only know how to speak English, because my schedule consisted of course, the only communications that I would have would be English during the start of the day, and then at the end of the day, it's just doing menial tasks and then being told orders and doing your best not to talk back or say anything back. Otherwise, you might get some form of punishment or discipline. So for me, just not having that practice of speaking, it was difficult for me. So I could understand what they were saying to me in Cantonese, but I just couldn't say anything back, and didn't have that practice for it. But when I told them, oh, well, I don't speak Chinese, and hearing their dialect too, I'm not too familiar with that. Like, I'm only familiar with how my parents say and articulate their words, my cousins, uncles, and family members in there, that, oh, I don't speak Chinese, and I don't understand how to say Chinese. And for those people, then they said, oh, well, you're a disgrace to our country and heritage. You should be ashamed of yourself, and your parents should be ashamed of yourself. And for me, at that moment of time, I catastrophized everything. So this is probably when I was about 8 years old. And when I heard those words, it's like the stressors of school, the stressors of family dynamics, and even the people who I thought looked like me that could potentially express some like empathy, I had no support from them too. Like, I felt like I did not belong with anything. Like, I felt like a piece of shit, and I felt like no one understood me, and I was just a person who was stealing the resources from other people, and I did not belong here on this earth. And because of that, I decided to. That was when I started developing my first few thoughts of suicide and like my depression and anxiety and those heightened risks. And of course, at that moment of time, like I didn't know how to respect, so I just, of course, you didn't want to shy away with the customers, and I didn't want to get yelled at by my parents at that moment of time. So I just accepted their words, shook my head, and we just went through and on about my day. And I was just carrying that accumulative stress because we were working every single day. So imagine that one instance, and then multiply that by 365 days or 366 days for a year, and multiple accumulations. So it just got to the point where I'm regularly exposed to that. So then when I started learning about the like word suicide, depression, or the thoughts of it, by the time I was 12 years old, I really realized like, oh crap, like, so this is what suicide means, and this is what like disgrace to your country and heritage means. And it just got to the point where even in middle school, I expressed openly that it's like, hey, I think it'd be better if I just died. Like, it's not worth living because I feel like I'm bothering other people and I'm just wasting resources and supplies, that it's not right for me to be here. And because of that, in that situation, a moment of time, I was referred to a therapist when I was in middle school, and my experience with that therapist was horrendous because when I sat in on there, the therapist was like, well, is the stuff that you're doing your fault? And are you making this up? And for me, that's how I perceived it. In that moment of time, it probably went differently and they were doing what they were practiced and trained to do. But for my perception at that moment of time, it just wasn't right. So I may have misconceived it and misunderstood what they were saying and translating. But for me over there, it's compounded the effects. And for me, I would always think about, well, if I'm by this ledge, like if I just jumped off, this is great. Or whenever I'm driving a car, I'm like, if I just drift off to the side of the road and get T-boned and kill myself that way, oh, that'd be awesome too. So I was having all these divisions just popping through my head consistently, and I'm not keeping track of it or account of it multiple times. So it's like from the age of 8 when the first thoughts manifested, multiply that by the daily amounts, and compound that for up until, I'd say like, because from this year in 2023, from January till like middle of February or like late February, I would say, I thought about killing myself about 6 times. So that's just 6 times where I have gotten better with other, like adjusting my diet and going through with those sorts of things, and mindfulness meditations, and going to see better therapists. That at that point, it that's just like a small compressed amount of number that I probably thought about like ending my life, probably, if I think about it, probably 8 times daily. And some days it'd be more, sometimes it'd be less, but thinking about that consistently in a multitude of times. And I wasn't vocal about it because whenever I did share it, some people would say, oh, well, you're just doing it for attention. Like, why are you doing that? And it just allowed me to realize that, hey, this is like, maybe if I try and do something else, we'll see what happens. So I just took everything day by day, thinking that maybe there is hope out there. I just need to get out of my shitty situation, make a new life for myself, try and make changes, and see what happens. And fortunately, I will say that once I went to like moved to different places, and we had those one friends, like I still had that apprehension and doubt in my mind, thinking that, yeah, we're good friends, but we're only good friends for when it benefits you. Until it doesn't benefit you, then I'm completely cut off. So I had that scarcity mindset of, crap, how can I try and please other people to make sure that I don't lose this, if I would lose that status or background that I do have with them. And it just caused a whole slew of my people-pleasing behavior that I've had for years. And now I'm getting better at removing those limiting barriers and thoughts, with progress with my therapist and even with my coaches, that it's been significantly better for my health overall, and even consciously as well as moving forward. So with that, moving forward for like that first therapist, so I didn't see another therapist until the last year of my undergraduate journey at my last university. and they have been significantly better in providing the resources that I needed at that time. So I'm a huge proponent of therapy is great. However, you got to find the right therapist for you, but also making sure that you also understand that whenever people say, oh, you're perfect just the way you are, for me, I'm not a fan of that term, because just the way you are, me hearing that for years is like, oh, so if it's fine just the way that I am, having these thoughts of wanting to end my life every time, and I really just needed to wake up and figure out what I could do to improve myself, that would have been significantly better. It's just more of like, what can you develop in different areas of your life in order to overcome that thought of suicide or negativity or those other things that lead up to it. And for fortunately, in my undergrad journey, moving about 5.5 hours away from my hometown to a new area for college, that was pretty helpful because I found some amazing friends. So shout outs to the most meaningful and valuable people in my life. They are basically my family, have helped me through, like, supporting me and helping me rebuild that trust that I can have again with other people. And I feel like a lot of the insecurities that I did have at those times, it was also attributed towards myself. Like, that self insecurity, it made my life significantly worse compared to if I would have had a better, more positive mindset and moving forward with that. So now that I have gone through that journey, some things that I just wanted to share from that story that I am where I'm currently at, some things that I found super helpful in changing that belief and that mindset as well. So the ways that I've felt that have allowed me to overcome my depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide to this day, from what I started implementing back in, I would say, yeah, just throughout my lifetime. The things that I found helpful and the things that I didn't find helpful. Now, some of these may help you, some of these may not help you. I always recommend figure out which things do help you and benefit you and utilize that and go from there. But some of the main things that I've learned from my journey is that, like, your perception is the only thing that you can change. Other people will have their own perceptions of you, and you can't change their view and lens on that. So it's better to focus on yourself and improving on yourself, and it'll get to the point where people will notice your changes, that you're changing for the better. However, if you're fearful of people not noticing the changes, then I feel like you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people, and you should instead focus more about which people are there who are continuously growing themselves so they can become the best that they can be. And then another thing that I have learned throughout that journey too is doing self affirmations in the mirror. I remember doing that for about a year. It helped maybe slightly, but it became pretty tedious and it fell off the chains. So I decided that let's change my mindset of saying, oh, I am this, to let's put that into action. Fortunately, I've had the opportunity of working with the Upgrade mental reprogramming program, and just doing their 21-day focus challenge has helped me significantly in figuring out what my goals are in the next 90 years. And not only is it just figuring out what those goals are, but imagining how I can reach those and removing some of the limiting barriers and beliefs that I've had in the past, that now I feel like I'm moving significantly faster towards it. And then other coaches that I'm working with, Dr. Brandon Smith, he's the founder of the Home Health Therapy Mentor Group, and he's been struggling a lot with the system as well. So for his story, feel free to look up and check out his book. But the main thing that resonated with me is that when his parents passed away when he was 20 years old or younger than that, like, both his parents passed away, and when he tried to work through it, like, people didn't care. So, like, it really goes to show that people just don't care about your situation until they figure out, they know how much you're able to help and support them, and then having that mutual relationship with them. But, like, he didn't have anybody in those moments or situations at the time, and it was up to him to get himself out of the situations that he was in. And he also thought about considering, like, ending his life, from my understanding too, based off his book that I read and the stories that he shared with me, and getting to the point where he was able to find his amazing supportive wife and creating resources so that he can help other people get out of their current situations and move forward with their life. And then my mentor, Rick Todd, he's been a huge proponent in changing my perspective and belief of what it means to observe having that abundance mindset that's going on. Because if people work in that scarcity mindset, like, it makes sense of why people are trying to cheat, steal, and having that lens also makes you feel like, crap, no, everyone's out here to get me and steal my resources with lies. Whereas for Greg, he teaches you and understands, like, no, well, we're living in a great time where if you're able to provide a resource and support other people, they are most likely going to reciprocate that back. And if they don't, then be happy with the fact that you serve them in order for them to achieve and reach their goals, and eventually they'll probably return that favor when they feel ready to do that. So just give the support where you need it without making sure that you exhaust your own resources. Because whenever you fly on an airplane or in emergency response situations, they always educate you that is the scene safe, and support and help yourself first before you feel ready to give and support other people. Because if you're not able to support other people while you're in a great state, think about it like this. You're drowning with 5 other people who are drowning. And if you're trying to save one other person while you're drowning, that's not going to help either of your situations, because you might accidentally end up causing both of you to drown. Because whenever you suffocate and you start drowning, you have that grasping response. So even you trying to push them up and save them, you might grasp onto them and then also pull them down too, where you both drown. Whereas in another situation, like if you're able to swim across to the shore and get yourself so that you are safer and you can find a boat to then rescue the other folks who are out there, then that's better. And the main difference between like you and the other people who are drowning at that point is you taking the time to learn how to swim in that situation. And once you are able to swim, then you got to swim out of it to collect the resources that you need, so that wealth, your any programs that you have that you would sell it for, and you have that trade, and then going out there to serve other people. That's just the way to go about it, in my opinion. And for those folks who's like, oh, well, things are super expensive, I can't afford to invest in myself and moving forward with that, then I feel like that's a reflection of how much you value your own worth. Because for me, I've spent probably tens of thousands of dollars investing into the current coaches that I have, the things that I've learned, and I feel like me spending this much through the later portion of my life has helped me way more significantly compared to the free resources that I've had when I was younger. And I attribute that due to the phrase that even one of my other mentors that I haven't met personally, but I love his YouTube videos and his content, is Alex Hormozzi and Layla Hormozzi, where they talk about their journeys and struggles and what they've learned and wanting to support other people to build skills so that they get out of that scarcity mindset to having more of that abundance mindset. And the more you're able to practice having that abundance mindset by honing in and achieving these skills that you want to develop, and it's not just having those skills that you develop for that small niche, it's like you want to make sure you have a great amount of those skills that you are able to be self-sufficient in those different ways. So it's that's basically what my journey is.
And then for the fun moment that I want to include for every one of these podcasts is, what is my zombie apocalypse survival plan? This is very underrated. I think raiding a veterinarian shop or a pet shop would be amazing, because I feel like the grocery stores and all those outlets would be filled in by a bunch of people already taking the supplies, the pharmacies for people taking the medications. However, for a pet store, if we get in the nitty gritty of it, we could technically eat all the pet foods that are there, because they would have canned tuna, canned meats, they kibble. Like, technically we could probably eat that, cook it up, and make it safe for us. The other things that they would have there too is medications. If you have a pretty solid understanding of what certain medications can interact with for our bodies and with those dosages of it, we're able to utilize those medications to support us. So it's basically a grocery store, but not a popular choice for other people. And it serves it the same way. And that would be my zombie apocalypse survival plan, is raiding that place first and then being able to collaborate with other folks to survive. Anyways.
I know that was a lot, but I do want to really hone in and emphasize the services that I provide with my programs. And as you all know, like, this podcast is a free resource that I want to share with y'all, and it also serves as an introduction for you to learn about what other people are providing. So if you decide, oh, I'm ready to make that investment in myself and achieve the results that I want, and then feel free and utilize them. And for the services that I provide with the diabetes management group, we work at different levels. So the first level is all of our free resources. You could join our Facebook group where you can interact with me and the other people that I'm currently working with. And I will never say that I am going to help people, and whenever I do, I'll do my best to correct myself, or y'all can work with me to correct myself on there, because I feel like help is more of a passive term, and I'm more of a we're going to work together with it. The clients that I work with, they put in 100% of the work to be the best client that they can be, and I put in 100% of my work to be the best coach that I can be, so that we can reach the benefits in that and their ideal self that they want to achieve, and develop their resources to utilize that, and develop their skills to be able to achieve what they want. And the first step is those free resources that I am providing just through social media, and also our private Facebook group where you can interact with me and others more directly. The second tier would be an email fitness program, and it can also include diet programs if you're interested in it, and you could let us know during the intake forms of what diets you're interested in or what's helpful for you. And of course, always consult with your healthcare provider. Everything I talk about here, as I mentioned earlier, it's not medical advice, just for educational purposes, but if it's something that you want to go down the route of, feel free to contact us. But in that portion right there, you can receive those materials so that you can work on your own fitness journey and understand the nutritional aspects of like diet and improving your life that way. And you could also receive email check-ins, and there's other benefits that can be provided with that too. We're currently developing that system, but if you want to get on a pre-wait list, feel free to fill out the form below, and we'll send you more details once that program is available. Then, of course, the next one would be some more personalized coaching, and then we will have a mastermind retreat in the future if you want to really elevate yourself to get to the point where you want to rid yourself of your type 2 diabetes or prediabetes and really have that impeccable ability to eradicate your diabetes, and also would like to be able to serve other people. And it's not just only going to be focused on like diet, exercise, and doing that for your diabetes, but it's also going to be based off of sharing you all with what I've learned from the investments I am investing in for the coaches that I'm working with, the evidence-based practice that's going out there, things I'm learning in physical therapy school, nutrition coaching certifications, as well as the connections that I have. And for those who decide that, oh, well, that program isn't for me, that's okay. The purpose for the show as well is to share with y'all's resources that are better fits for you, because I understand that I have a specific niche that I want to work with, people who are ready to make that transition and that jump, and some people just aren't ready to make that, and I am completely okay with it. That's your choice, up to you what you want. But just want to, instead of having that, I want to make sure that we can work with each other to figure out, well, what are your goals, so that we can get you connected to the right resources to allow you to achieve what you want to achieve. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending this first episode, and we appreciate your support. Again, if you're interested in getting in touch with me and the Diabetes Management Group and what I do there, you can give me a follow at Diabetes Management Group on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those slews. But if you want to connect with me personally, you could connect with me on Instagram at PLUO09 on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter. I just use my physical therapy account on there, but if you are interested in working with me through the Diabetes Management Group, there's those options there. But if you want to contact me personally, I did put my personal social media pages down there in the description below. So thank you all so much for tuning in for our first podcast episode, and I'm excited for our next podcast episode next week, where we'll work with someone who has type 1 diabetes. So you all are in for a special treat next week, and I'm looking forward to providing these resources for y'all so that you can elevate your understanding and levels of improving your health and wellness. So have a good one.